Welcome to the 12th District, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kerry Kandata from the NCW Life channel. It has been another fascinating week in politics. We're going to talk about international, national, and local news in politics. We're also going to have a special guest today. Harvey Jesdal will be here to talk about the Sanctuary State movement, which is now probably the most controversial program that was launched out of this session. There are so many things that were controversial. But this one was a big deal and people are very unhappy with it. One sheriff in Spokane County has already said he will not enforce that bill and has gone so far as to say that Jay Inslee should probably be arrested for various charges for interfering with the immigration situation, the federal immigration system, but I don't think it'll get that far. But we'll talk more about that. And then at the end today, we will wrap it up by giving you an update on Initiative 1648. Folks, I told you last week this thing was hot. If you haven't seen the show with Tim Eyman, you can go back on demand at ncwlife.com programs, look up the 12th District on demand, and watch that show to learn about the hottest grassroots movement probably ever in Washington State. We'll talk about that at the end of the show and give you an update, tell you how you can get involved if you want to be part of that program. Well, it's great to have you back. Another crazy week in politics as usual. We'll cover it all when we return, and we'll have Harvey Jesdal in the second segment to talk about Sanctuary State. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 12th District. We'll have a short newscast before we have our special guest today to talk about the Sanctuary State and other issues that law enforcement has in the state of Washington. Well, Donald Trump went overseas last week to England, and a lot of people were trying to figure out exactly what his approach would be and how it would affect Brexit. And it looks like, as all said and done, not much. Didn't really weigh in too much on the Brexit situation. Pretty much pomp and circumstance, a nice visit. I think he got better press in England than he ever gets here, but that's to be expected. And his speech at the D-Day ceremony was actually taken very positively by even some of the folks that don't like him very well. He got pretty rave reviews in that speech, so that's good news from overseas. While he was in England, Mexico was here in Washington, D.C. with trade talks because the president has talked about putting a tariff, an increasing tariff on Mexico for imports if they do not solve or help solve the border issue, which has been a real problem. Mexico is allowing people to march right through from Central America into the United States, and President Trump's had about enough of that and has told them if they don't get their act together on helping us control that border, that he will start with a 5% tariff and ratchet that up over a period of time to as high as 25%. Of course, this could have some major repercussions on our agriculture here in this area. So let's hope that those trade talks are successful. It looks like they're moving at least in the right direction. And the latest news was those tariffs may be delayed while talks continue. And that's certainly good news. More good news on the economy coming out. The first quarter was running at a GDP of a 3.4% increase, again, above 3%. We didn't see that in all 8 years of the Obama administration. We've seen it repeatedly here. The economy is still very strong. Unemployment is at a record low, and across the board for all races and for all denominations, it's pretty amazing how well things are going. And it looks like even with the tariffs and the trade talks with China, that things are continuing. Of course, the Fed has now weighed in and said they will make adjustments to interest rates as necessary if the Chinese trade situation starts to slow things down. So it looks like all the cards are with the president right now, and he's playing it hardball. And I'm thinking it's probably going to be just fine as it works forward. All right, on some more statewide issues, here's something I didn't see in the news that I thought was of interest. The Supreme Court of Washington State has upheld the case against the Richland Washington florist who refused to do flowers for a gay wedding. Of course, this has been some time working its way through the courts, but the fact that they upheld it here is interesting because it will be appealed, and they believe they have the power now and the support to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. This would be a massive decision at the Supreme Court of the United States, a big deal, and it looks like it may be heading that way, all starting right here with an incident in Richland, Washington. The L&I, Labor and Industries of Washington State, has started a new rule, or at least is ready to apply a new rule to salaried workers, which would substantially increase the cost of labor throughout the state of Washington. It would increase the overtime rule for people salaried under $80,000. Right now it's around $23,000 to $24,000. If you're salaried above that, there is no overtime rule in place. They want to raise it to $80,000, a substantial increase for one move. And so anyone salaried under $80,000 would be able to collect overtime if they certainly work more than 40 hours a week. And that could have some real repercussions throughout the businesses here in Washington State. And again, could build another brick in the wall to people coming here to do business, which already have an uphill battle with all the other fine features that Washington offers. I guess that's why Idaho is the fastest growing state in the nation, and we're not. All right, Boeing says they have a fix for the 737. You've probably heard this. They're shopping it. They're trying to get the FAA and others around the world to approve this change. This is a computer update for the 737 MAX. Of course, they need to get that happening because they're backing up on the tarmac over at the Renton plant. Production is going to have to cease if they can't get these things moving, and I believe they will. But it has been a slow process. But originally, the 737 was not going to fly until possibly September. It looks like that could be quite a bit sooner if everything is approved, and that certainly would be good for Boeing and for exports and for Washington State. All right, well, we talked earlier about the fallout from the sanctuary state movement, the bill that Jay Inslee signed, making it very difficult to ask about immigration status across the state of Washington for law enforcement, for businesses, for government officials, and others. The fact of the matter is it has not gotten good response. Not at all. As a matter of fact, it's probably the most talked about of all the controversial bills that were signed in the session. And at least one sheriff has spoken out in Spokane. The Spokane County Sheriff has said he will not follow those rules. He's going to go with the federal rules, and he will do what's necessary to maintain his immigration status and do what he's been doing for years over there. I salute that. I think that's good. And we're going to have in just a few minutes Harvey Jesdal on as our special guest to talk more about that issue right here in this area. Well, I told you I'd have a little something for you about the election, something I've predicted for some time but has now leaked out. And this is a statewide election for governor next year in 2020. As you know, our governor, Jay Inslee, is running for president, has still not cracked the top 20 as of this recording this show, and actually has not gained any ground at all. He will be involved in the first debates coming up. We'll see how that goes and see if it can get him to the second debates. But there has been some communication uncovered where Mr. Inslee has asked his three top potential candidates, which are Ferguson, the Attorney General, Franz, the Department of DNR, leader of DNR, Hillary Franz, and of course Dal Constantine, the King County officer there, director. Those three have all considered running for governor. Well, Jay has formally asked them to not make any announcements until later this fall. So it's pretty obvious that if Jay doesn't make it, as we described months ago, that he will run or seek a third term for governor in the state of Washington. That's not good news for Washington State, but frankly, 2 out of 3 of these candidates, and I won't say who, probably aren't good news either. All right, on a local level, the McCleary story just continues and continues. If you haven't seen the McCleary episode we did a few weeks ago, go on demand at NCW Life and get the story, because you're not getting the whole story. There's a 20-year history on that show. You just simply go to NCW Life Programs, 12th District, and go back and review the show that has McCleary in the title. It will tell you the 20-year history of how we got here and how it's not exactly all above board. The fact is, the local school districts are being encouraged to go back above $1.50. They now have the ability to collect up to $2.50 based on what happened in the last session, and they are being encouraged by, of course, who else but the Teachers Association, Teachers Union, to take the full amount or at least take an increase. That will be very interesting considering there are some school board positions coming up this fall in the election. And that should be decided in the next week or two. I would say, folks, absolutely not. We have given $9 billion additional dollars to schools. Now, not all evenly. Some came out better than others, but all of them got a substantial increase. Teachers got substantial raises, and enough is enough. And more property taxes is certainly not what this valley needs with the cost of housing and rent as it is right now. There's no doubt about it. That will be an interesting story. Well, we've covered national and state. We're going to come right back and talk to Harvey Jesdal, former sheriff, 12 years sheriff of Douglas County, a rural county in the center of Washington with a high level of immigration. And we'll see what he has to say about Sanctuary State, Initiative 1639, use of force, and other things around law enforcement. When we return, Harvey Jesdal. This is Kerry Condata. You're watching NCW Life Channel. Welcome back to the 12th District. Well, as promised, we have a special guest today to talk about one of the hottest subjects in the state right now. Jay Inslee signing the Sanctuary State Bill, one of the first states to create this situation statewide. You know, many cities have done this, but this is the first state to kind of take it on, and that hasn't gone well with the public or with a lot of folks in the law enforcement business. But we are fortunate today to have Harvey Jesdal, from former Douglas County Sheriff. For 12 years you did that. I thought it was 8, but you said 12 years.
12 years.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Now retired, but still involved, still thinking about politics and police work, I'm sure.
It doesn't go away.
Doesn't go away, does it? So, okay, before we get into the actual Sanctuary State thing, just tell me a little bit about, I mean, the perception from people on the other side is that we're over here rounding up illegals and shipping them back and breaking up families and doing all kinds of bad things. You've got a county that you oversaw that probably has a 30+% Hispanic population. What's the real story? I mean, you're not rounding up people and sending them back.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. You know, like any other agency, we worked with ICE when it was appropriate, but certainly we didn't enforce federal law. It was not our job. But when it started to become sort of a hot issue, we told the public, if we go out and do a criminal investigation and we find out someone's illegal, and that may involve asking them, you bet we call ICE.
Right.
But it wasn't our job to go out and do the work of the federal government. It's never been that way, and I don't know of any of the other law enforcement agencies in the area that conduct business that way.
I think that's the general feeling we're getting, but they just don't seem to get that on the other side. Now, before we even get to Sanctuary State, we've had issues of use of force, another new law of use of force. How do you feel about that?
Oh, brother.
Not good, huh?
I really feel that this state they go out of their way to tie the hands of law enforcement, whether it's use of force, opening the borders and allowing more criminals in, and that is what's going on, in my humble opinion. It used to be, for example, we had what was called a search incident to arrest. So if I arrested somebody for any reason, you would search them in any unlocked compartment. If we took them out of a car, any unlocked compartment for fruits of the crime, contraband, whatever.
Sure.
We can't do that anymore.
Oh,
and
wow.
honestly, that's where we picked up a lot of our serious drugs, a lot of our stolen property. But now the laws have changed to where what I think is a very reasonable search doctrine is now out the window. And that and the use of force, it's just getting tougher and tougher, I think, for officers to keep people safe.
Well, and I think they become hesitant, too, to use force and to make the decisions they have to make, right? I mean, it's very difficult when you get in that position. You've been there. And if you hesitate, you could be lost.
Right, exactly. And, it used to be the philosophy was, obviously you're prudent about use of force. You've got to be, because you need the people to trust you. But the rule was you always came home to your family. But I almost get the sense that there's factions in our community, our political community, that would rather you wait till the bullets coming down the barrel towards you before you move to act. And I'm overstating that.
I understand, but that just doesn't work in the real world.
Yeah.
So in terms of use of force, you obviously have seen some issues there. And again, that search situation. Well, we've seen what's happened in Seattle. I mean, they've obviously dialed down their police force to the point where they can't do anything.
Those poor men and women.
I'm telling you, I know several police officers that have been over there for years, and they just are trying to ride out their time or buy their time to the end and get out of there because it's so bad. Crime is so bad. Homelessness. The drugs, they're dealing drugs. Business people tell me they're dealing drugs right in front of the cops on the street. Doesn't matter. They don't care.
Right.
They're not going to get busted. I mean, I hope we don't ever see that here. Is that a concern? I mean, it's coming. I mean, more and more people seem to be taking that attitude.
I hope not. I hope not in our lifetime, not in my children's lifetime. Mm-hmm. But, it's, what do they call it, creeping incrementalism. I mean, I think it's working its way over here.
Yep.
You see little vestiges of it here now and again. When I was in the service, I spent time in Seattle. They billet us downtown sometimes. And even then, I've been out of the reserves since 2015. But even then, I'd walk downtown and see some of the most appalling things that you could ever imagine. It's like what was once appalling becomes tolerable.
Yeah,
and then
it keeps going.
and then pretty soon what was just tolerable is praised. And
Right.
I'm not exactly sure where it's going to end, but you're right, it's tough on law enforcement.
Now, the other issue over here is a big one is guns and gun control and all this. And of course, people over here just absolutely support the Second Amendment because most of them are gun owners. There's a lot of guns, there's a lot of ammunition out there in Douglas County and Chelan County. And yet we have very little gun crime. And I think that's part of the reasons because people are armed. Do you agree? I mean, do you see any reason we should restrict any of these guns or ammunition at this point in our area?
No.
We've had no issues.
It's not to say we've had no issues, but to ban or restrict any more than already is, we've got an entire title of laws that restrict the use of weapons. It's not going to help anything.
Right.
It's cliche, but the criminals are going to get their guns whether we restrict them or not. And and if you tell me, just as a citizen, as a person that was in law enforcement, 33 years in law enforcement, 24 years in military, you're going to tell me that I can't go out and buy a semi-automatic Benelli? That offends me personally. It's a constitutional right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now we're down to the sanctuary state thing, and this is just amazing that we've gotten this far. And so, how do you think that's going to affect being an area that has a substantial amount of immigration? We know a substantial amount of illegal immigration because they are here to work on the farms. For the most part, they're really good people. You're right, there's criminals, there's drugs. You're going to have some of that. How is this going to affect your folks, your previous officers in Chelan County and the rest, in terms of being able to do their job?
Maybe not too much. Maybe not a lot. It's like I was saying. I mean, we didn't go around ever asking people if they were citizens or not, unless we were doing an investigation. Because why would you? However, I do think it is another chink in our armor. It's just another little tiny move, even if it's symbolic and political, towards open borders. And I do believe we're gonna have a big influx of crime and criminals and people abusing the system. It's not a good thing. We cannot have open borders. Again, that's my professional and personal opinion.
Well, I think you and I both agree, and I've talked ad nauseum on this show about a orderly immigration system. Now, we're not trying to shut down the border. We're not trying to shut anybody out.
No.
If anybody wants to come here, they should be able to come here. But it's got to be organized. It's got to be recorded. It can't just be this wide open situation because look at the amount of drugs and weapons and things that are moving. It's just scary. And we're clear up here at the north end.
Exactly. And I think the tool of some political factions is, well, you were saying that because you must be racist. But that's so far from the truth. Have you ever gone to a naturalization ceremony?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Norma Gallegos.
Yes, that's the one I went to.
Yeah, and I've never been so proud of people from all over the world in my life.
Yeah.
So that's not it. It's just you got to have there's got to be an orderly process. It's got to be enforced.
You brought up a terrific point that I heard when I was in Olympia from the folks on the other side who tend to be more Democrats say that we're the racists, we're this, we're that. We use and abuse these people in our industries and throw them into the streets. And, it's very offending because have you really seen a racism issue in this town? And this town has more mix, I think, more different types of folks from different places than anywhere probably except Seattle. And yet I see no issues.
To say it doesn't, we have no racism.
Oh, you're going to have some.
You're going to have some. But the people here are good. I mean, I think we're all American pretty much. And there are probably places in the country that aren't as great as we are.
Right.
But you can't use the word racism to strike fear into someone who's pushing back a little bit. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we have some pretty violent drug wars going on just south of our border.
Right.
Just south of the border.
Sure.
And frankly, honestly, I don't hear a lot of violent drug wars going on in Banff, Canada. You got to call it what it is.
Sure.
Yet it has nothing to do with racism.
It doesn't. That's
it does
the point. It does not. And I got to tell you, the Hispanic population here has done really well without affirmative action, without a lot of help. They have been very successful and they're moving up the ladder. I think I see everybody getting along here just fine. And I just hate to see this sanctuary city create racism or create a problem. And that's what I think we're doing is we're just making the problem worse.
I think you're right. I think it does create some fear because, people like you and I, and a lot of people probably watching this show are going, we've done pretty well in this country. And change is good, but we're going too far too fast.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line. All right, there you have it. Harvey Jesdal, thanks for joining us today. I will be right back to wrap up the show and talk about a little bit about next week. All right, well, that's today's show. We do have a little bit of wrapping up to do here. We have another major announcement that just came hot off the press we're going to tell you about in just a minute. One of our friends here in town just was given quite a nice assignment, basically appointment. We'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. Well, Initiative 1648 has become the hottest grass fire initiative since $30 tabs back in 1999. The Facebook page has now acquired over 6,500 members who are all out getting petition signatures. They are opening new locations with over 400 locations currently identified to sign petitions. This is like nothing we've ever seen. Even the Republican Party has taken notice. They are having an emergency meeting to decide if they can endorse this initiative. I would hope they would. This would roll back all the taxes that were put, all the new 11 taxes that were put into place during the session, which were completely unnecessary given the amount of revenue that the state had to deal with. But 11 new taxes totaling $27 billion over 10 years could all go away if 1648 makes the ballot and is then voted in. Now remember, the petition only gets it on the ballot. It takes 322,000 signatures, which is a very difficult ladder to climb in just 40 days. And we only have about half that time left to get those signatures. You can check it out on Facebook at Washington for I-1648. That's Washington I-1648. There are numerous locations throughout the valley here if you want to sign that petition and have a shot to roll those taxes back in the fall. Well, as just announced recently, John Wise, we've been trying to get John Wise back on this show. He's kind of our national guy. He's been in D.C. an awful lot, and now we know maybe why. John Wise has been appointed as the State Executive Director of the USDA's Farm Service Agency, that's FSA, for the entire state of Washington. So quite an appointment for John Wise. I've wondered why he's been so busy, but I think he's going to continue to be very busy being a statewide executive director for USDA's Farm Service Agency. He'll be working out of an office in Spokane. He will be working also out of the office here in Wenatchee, which is right across the street from NCW Life. So we will try to capture him in the next week or two, not only to tell us about his new job, but to tell us what's really going on the inside on immigration, trade, and other issues in D.C. It seems like things are fairly stagnant back there, but he says there is news, there is some progress, and we'd like to hear from him. Once again, if you haven't seen our previous shows, you can check them out on demand at ncwlife.com. Go to programs, go to the 12th District, and you'll find all the episodes all the way back as far as you want to go. I highly encourage you to look at the Tim Eyman segment on Initiative 1648. He also talks a little bit about $30 tabs, which, believe it or not, will be on the ballot this fall, again, 20 years later. And also the McCleary Show, which has been seen hundreds and hundreds of times across the state. I think that is probably the most pertinent to what's going on around us right now with the potential for more property taxes right around the corner. Well, you'll get the inside story every week here on the 12th District. There's more to come, more guests, more information. Again, we'll try to get John Wise in here as soon as possible to talk about his new position and to tell us what's really going on the backside in Washington, D.C. We'll tell you what's going on the backside of Washington and Olympia and also locally. All right, that's it for me, Kerry Condata, NCW Life Channel. This is the 12th District. We'll see you next week.